Technology is great when it works.
Amen. Looks like it is. Okay, Nadine, ready to roll.
You're not alone when the weight feels heavy and the road is long. You've been holding on, trying to stay strong. Doctors and paperwork, so much to face, but here you found a safer place. You're not alone. We're standing by your side, helping you through every twist in the ride. With knowledge, care, and a voice that's true, the Disability Digest is here for you. We've walked the path, we've heard the fight, we know the pain that hides from sight. But every story matters, every win is real. Together we rise, together we heal. You're not alone, we're standing by your side, helping you through every twist in the ride.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. It's Brian Terrian from the Disability Digest. Welcome to our Wednesday YouTube Live. Today's a special event, folks. We have industry expert attorney James Mitchell Brown with us here today. Thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Yes, your timing is impeccable. With everything that's going on with the changes in Social Security, the levels of service have gone that way. The increased in CDRs are going this way. And then we have this thing called the big, beautiful bill. So we're going to unpack it all, get your perspective on it today about like, how is it going to impact people's ability to like interact with Social Security, go through the approval process, keep their benefits, and roll through these. So thank you. Thank you. Great. And as always, Nadine is here to co-host with us. Thanks so much.
Of course, my pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So if you have not attended one of these before with attorney James Mitchell Brown, a brief intro. He, in my opinion, is what I refer to as the industry expert. I've been doing this work. This is my 20th year. And if there's one person that I could look to for advice and knowledge, it's definitely Jim. You practice still, you had a practice, you sold a practice, you're still doing work in this space now, but you consult, you teach in this industry. This has been your life's work. So thank you for coming, joining, and contributing.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, we always have fun when we do these. I do anyway,
I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so first things first, we want to address some of the levels of service that Social Security has going on, what's going on in that area, like the head count, the wait time, when do we think it's going to change, if it'll change. Do that section first. Then I want to go through the big, beautiful bill impact on people. So let's start with this first of all. A lot of people are like, they're more annoyed than usual, I would say, in my experience with what's going on with Social Security and the interactions. And I believe a lot of this has to do with, we have all these new applications, 1.9 million on average annually, but we've seen, there's more challenges out there. So I guess before I get into all the nitty gritty, like in this environment right now, is there something that somebody could do differently? Are there common, significant things that people are doing to block them from getting approved in today's environment? Is that question clear?
No, you broke up. So tell me that once more.
So I'm wondering, in today's environment, let me check my mic here. If like with everything that's going on in the decrease in service, I think this is the reason why. Can you hear me better now?
Much better.
Okay, now I can't hear you though. I'm wondering, what are the common reasons that people are not being able to get approved? There's 1,000,009 applications. There's 629,000 people that get approved. Is there like a short, concise, like, don't do this if you want to get approved, comment that you have for people to start?
Well, one of the
Oh, we
problems
don't hear
is,
you, Jim. I think your microphone is muted.
let me check here.
I
Hold
can
on a
I
minute.
can hear. I can hear you.
You can hear me, Nadine?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Oh,
Brian
we do?
can't.
Okay, hang on. Maybe it's me then.
Is that better?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
I think the audio now. All right, let's do a
Can you hear
sound
me
check.
now?
I can hear you now. Yeah, it was on my part. I've had a little tech difficulty. All right, we're
Okay.
ready to roll.
Okay. The best I've been able to determine is there's a little over 10,000 fewer employees. There's a hiring freeze, so they're not going to replace them. They're going to lose more employees every month because of retirement, because of the buyout in September, and they're given time limits on how fast they have to process the claims. This is especially true at the reconsideration level, where they're barely looking at files. So the first thing you can do is make sure you have all of your medical records. If you've been off work less than a year when you're filing the claim, you're not going to lose any time by waiting till you have all the medical records. But a large percentage of the claims are denied because the case manager at the Disability Determination Service doesn't get all the medical records and their time runs out and they don't have enough, so they deny the claim. If you submit a nice package of medical records with your claim, they have them all. They also get credit for getting all those medical records, so they're going to look more favorably on you.
Oh, really?
Yes, because they're evaluated based on quantity of cases, not quality of work. So if you give them all the medical records and they have enough to approve the claim, you're more likely to get approved. So when I file an initial application, I immediately send for all the medical records, and I often have them before the case even gets to a case manager at DDS.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I have a question for you. If you're doing an initial application, submitting the medical records is one thing, but I see if you have decreased head count, same amount of applications, making their job easier is kind of the vibe that I'm getting, right?
Right. The other thing is, let's say like on a case that I just got approved, I submitted 4,000 pages of medical records. This
Mm-hmm.
person had been hospitalized a lot.
Mm-hmm.
If the case manager had read 4,000 pages of medical records, she would have been fired because that would have been the only case she handled all week. I submitted a one-page memo summarizing the medical records. The case manager could have looked and seen that the first line I said was page 123 of the medical record said something. She would have checked and found that was right. And then page 260 said something. And once she checked a couple and saw that everything I said was accurate, she just believes my memo.
Yeah.
If I ever wasn't honest on the memo, they would never approve a case of my clients again.
Yeah.
So I always make sure it's legitimate, but I'm saving them time and showing them why the case should be paid.
I want to dig in on this one a little bit more because I think this is where representation definitely provides value. Also, here at the Disability Digest, we have taught you how to write like a summary of your disability case if you choose to venture out and do it on your own. But think about it. You've got somebody's work that you're doing for them, making it easy for them to go through and make a decision because it's like a case brief you're putting together.
Yes,
You provide theory.
it's even less than a brief because it's
Yeah.
a one-page summary, sometimes 2 pages of all the medical records.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know how to read 4,000 pages of medical records in, say, 2.5 or 3 hours at the most, because a lot of those records are meaningless. They're lab reports, EKG reports, things that I don't have to read. I can read the summary in about 10 seconds and know whether it's relevant or not. But I give them what's relevant. I've done this long enough that I know which records are relevant. I give them a bullet on my page of what page and what it says. And I'm highlighting enough for the person making the decision to know there's enough there.
Yeah, yeah. So for anybody listening out there, if you are like here at the Disability Digest, you can join us as a member, no cost. You get access to the disability approval course, there's no cost. But you also have representation option. Everybody does, it's your choice. But if you choose to hire a representative, I really hope that you tuned in to what Attorney Brown is saying, because not all representatives, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, do this full service work where they're going to go through and drill through your medical records and then put a summary together and present it to Social Security. So just getting somebody on the job is not the answer. It's getting the right person on the job if you choose to go in this direction. Do you have an opinion on that?
Most don't on the initial application.
Yeah.
And I love winning cases on the initial application. One I had recently was a 54-year-old person with rheumatoid arthritis, severe problems in the lower extremities, and using a walker. That made them an automatic winner.
Mm-hmm.
But that was in page 500 and something of the medical records. But pointing that out made the case a winner immediately. Or another one, if you've had heart surgery and you still have chest pain that takes more than 4 minutes to go away, you win automatically.
Mm-hmm. If
one of the things I always tell my clients is, if you're having chest pains, make sure you tell your doctor, because it has to be in the doctor's records. But if it's there and you point it out, they don't have to go any further. That's enough to approve the claim.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good stuff. So I want to pivot. That's a really important tip for anybody that is working in today's environment, attempting to get your benefits approved. I want to go over to those that are approved, because there's been a big movement in the continuing disability review. I think a lot of this is driven by our administration and the cost savings. And so they have increased the funding for $52 million for continuing disability reviews. And they're like, I don't know exactly what the balance is between, maybe, I know there's less short forms, more long forms. But can you speak to this specifically about what people, should be aware of to do now in preparation for this? And the whole preface of this question is, here at the Disability Digest, when you join as a member and you're approved, Attorney Brown was kind enough to put together a How to Survive Your Continuing Disability Review course. That is all part of your membership. You can get the full meal deal there. But while you're out there and listening now, how would you address that?
Well, if we look back into the last time they put a lot of money into continuing disability reviews, they first went after the people who were getting disability for a mental condition. Those are the people least able to fight back when they get the review. So if all or part of your disability is mental, figure you're going to get reviewed first.
Okay.
I put nothing less than that on this administration.
Okay.
When I win a case for disability, I send my clients a notebook. And I say, write the date. And everybody here should do this. Buy your own notebook or keep it in your computer, but do it. Write the date and the name of the doctor every time you have an appointment. And when you do that, don't just include the doctors treating you for the condition that disabled you. If you go to the dentist, do it. If you go to the urgent care for a cold or for strep throat, do it. The more lines you fill up, the less likely they are to read it. Every time you get a new medicine, write the date, the name of the medicine, and why you're taking it. And you're going to have some days that are bad days. So write the date and a few sentences about why it's a bad day. I woke up this morning, my migraines were terrible. It took me an hour before I could get out of bed. I had trouble reading the medicine labels to take my medicine in the morning. Whatever it is, right? Why it was a bad day. I was so irritable. I yelled at my kids and my spouse more than usual. But do that. If you try and put it all together when you get your continuing disability review form, you're just trying to remember from whatever the last 3 years have been. If you have a diary that shows it, you fill out the form, but then you take your diary to the field office and say, copy this and attach this to the form. I want to file it now.
Mhm.
Unofficially, because I can't say it's official, but the more pages of your diary you give them to read, the less likely they are to read it. In Ohio, they have to do 31 continuing disability reviews a week. If you give them 50 or 100 pages of diary to read, they're going to just say this person's still disabled and go on to the person who just gave them the form. So the lawyers talk about the weight of the evidence, which means who has better evidence. I like to think of it in this case as who has more pounds of paper to give them.
Volume.
Volume. The more
Yeah.
you give them, the less likely they are to read it, and the more likely they are to pass you by and go on to the next person.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good tip, but I also expect that you want to make these journal entries and the information and the evidence that you're creating be consistent with your conditions, because if there's one little glimmer of like credibility issues, they're going to exploit it with that.
Right. The other thing that's important is you may have gotten disability because you've had 3 back surgeries and you have numbness in one leg. And since then, you've had a heart attack and AFib.
Mm-hmm.
Include that.
Mm-hmm.
Social Security has to prove that you've improved enough to return to gainful employment.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
They don't have to prove that just from the conditions that disabled you. They have to prove it for your overall health. So if you have new diagnoses, make sure you include that, because that's important to show your continuing disability.
Beautiful. All right, so quick pause here. For those of you, I see people are still piling in online. We want to go through like what the expectations are for Social Security service. Then we're going to talk about the big, beautiful bill. But Nadine, would you just give everybody a heads up of how they could submit questions for our Q&A that we're going to have when we complete this?
Absolutely. So later on, we are going to give everyone the opportunity to join us live and ask a question live with us. Get the chance to get your questions answered by none other than Brian and attorney James Brown. So I'll be posting the link to the Zoom meeting later in the show. And I would also appreciate it if you can drop in your questions in the comments so that we would have an idea of what your questions are going to be before I let you in the room. And if you're the shy type, you can also just drop in your question and I can read it out and Brian will answer it. I mean, Brian and Attorney James will answer it later. So yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. So back to the questions here. So what I want to learn more about and share with people is like, is there an end in sight? We've seen the reduction in staffing, and I guess there's really more to this. And I'm just wondering, first of all, before we can kind of dig into like some expectations for a return to normalcy, why wouldn't this reduction have been done in like a normal business format where you phase out like 1,000 a year or 1,800 rather than this massive, right? I mean, they still could have been effective and maintained some level of service. I don't know if there's any.
Elon Musk took over Social Security for a while. He still has Doge people there. And They said there's too many people at Social Security and cut 7,000. And from what I've heard, 3,100 took early retirement. I actually had a hearing continued because the judge took early retirement and there was nobody to replace him for that hearing. So they had to reschedule it. So, yes, they, in a normal situation, they would have let attrition happen as people were retiring because Social Security has an older workforce. Don't replace them.
Yeah.
Maybe get rid of some people who weren't performing well, give them warnings and get rid of them. But this was the massive, let's get rid of people done by people who don't know what the system does or how it works. And Social Security's employees are paid from the Social Security fund. So it wasn't saving the federal budget any money. It was just a massive dismissal of employees who are providing service to the public.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of questions about how that could have been handled differently, and it's tough. So that being said, to get to whatever level it is of headcount that's going to allow this service to stabilize, is there you have any optimism, anything that you know or can share that, maybe in 6 months or 10 months, if they keep on this trend?
Service is only going to get worse.
Okay.
If you call Social Security now, you'll probably be told your wait time is going to be an hour and 20 minutes. And do you want to hold or do you want us to call you back? If you tell them to call you back, your call back will probably come in 3 to 4 hours, if not the next day.
Yeah.
If you hold, you better have a good book to read or some work to do while you're waiting, because if they say an hour and 20 minutes, it might be an hour and 40 minutes or 3 hours, because they don't really know how long each caller is going to take that's calling. And often while you're on hold, you get cut off. And then you have to start over.
Yeah, I know my personal experience in doing this, that I've had to get involved recently to help get some money released to clients, and calling the payment center. They don't take calls, but they'll take your number and your message, and they say that there's a 2-day callback. So I've left a message 5 times. How many times have I received a call back?
Zero.
Zero.
Right.
So it's, yeah.
The payment center, from what I hear, is one of the places that they've lost the most employees. They've taken people from the payment center who weren't fired and moved them into other departments. So where people used to get paid pretty fast after a favorable decision, it's now anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months.
Yeah. So, getting a favorable decision is, of course, favorable in step 1, but then there's a collections component to getting money in. Not all cases, but we see that. Okay, so it's going to get worse. We just have to deal with it. So stay tuned here. We'll do the best. We have to play the hand we've been dealt, as they say. And it's they still issue checks. They're still in business, right? So
yes,
okay.
But the bill that was passed last year, which was a good bill, that said if you're getting a state or local pension and your Social Security is reduced because of it, you'll no longer have Social Security reduced because of the state or local pension, which was fair because they took all your Social Security. They just didn't give it to you. But that is going to deplete the fund faster, too.
All right. So here's the section of the program that most have been waiting for, which is the recent passing of the big, beautiful bill. I just want to read a few quotes from the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore. One of the worst bills for working families our country has ever seen. If you're a multimillionaire, congratulations. That's one. From our own Vermonter here, Bernie Sanders. says this bill throws over 16 million people off of healthcare insurance by slashing Medicaid in the Affordable Care Act. Says this legislation is the most dangerous piece of legislation in U.S. modern history. It is a death sentence. So that being said, we want to go through how this bill, like get right into it. What aspects of this bill are going to be like detrimental to people that are trying to get their benefits, keep their benefits, and address some of these. So let's start with like the big question. What is like the single most urgent threat, Jim, that this bill poses to, let's say, to recipients? Let's start.
Before I get there, let me give you one blatant example of the deceit in this bill. It says there's no tax on tips up to $25,000, except in order to pay no taxes on your tips up to $25,000, you have to itemize your deductions, and you can no longer take the standard deduction of $15,000. So all of a sudden, what looks like a great thing for people isn't so great, because how many people have itemized deductions of $15,000 or more, but they now have to itemize, so their deductions are going to be less in order to get their no tax on tips. So they're going to be losing money on it.
Yeah. I'll give you just one from a different perspective that I see. This is Amazon Prime Week, right? So
Yep.
Amazon Prime offers a discount to people that receive Medicaid or SNAP or other government programs like that. And you can save about 50% on your Amazon Prime and get all the goodies. Well, that's great. But if you're on Amazon Prime now and you're likely and target to get knocked off of your government assistance program, that's going to go up. So you got to be aware, if you're on Prime right now and you're getting a discount, watch closely because you could get whacked.
Right. Now, as far as what's this going to do to people, a lot of the people applying for disability are on Medicaid. If you have to work to keep your Medicaid, is that going to affect your ability to get Social Security disability? The amount of hours you work aren't going to affect your right to disability, but it may make Social Security skeptical that you could work more, you're just not doing it. It's going to knock a lot of people off of Medicaid, which means they're not going to get the medical care to prove they're disabled.
Right.
And it's just going to be a vicious cycle of I can't get medical care, so I can't prove I'm disabled. Or let's say the person applies for SSI, they're on Medicaid, they get denied on the initial, and then get cut off of Medicaid because they didn't prove they were disabled. And while they're appealing, they can't get any more medical care.
Mm-hmm. So I would think the most vulnerable would be, well, maybe not the most. A vulnerable segment of our population is somebody who is not necessarily living paycheck to paycheck, but pretty darn close. And everybody thinks that, you know, life is going to roll forever and nothing's going to happen. But an individual like that, who doesn't have short-term, long-term disability, has a sickness or an injury, then enters a system where they could have historically relied on Medicaid for some treatment, likely will not have access to it. Is that a fair example?
That's where Bernie Sanders said it's a death warrant.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those of you newbies out there, in order to get your disability benefits approved, there's several things that need to happen right. You need to have a condition that is diagnosed, and then that condition needs to be successfully treated. So you can prove that despite the treatment, the limitations that you have are not going away. Thus, you're not able to work. So you think about it this way. You have the conditions, you probably can get a diagnosis. But if you're not able to afford treatment and you're going to choose to eat instead, then you're not going to have the treatment to support your Social Security disability. So it's an issue. Yeah.
Another issue, let's say you have hypertension, high blood pressure, and you don't know it. So therefore, you're not getting the medicine for that high blood pressure, which eventually leads to you having a stroke. And then you have that stroke and you're eligible for disability because you've stroked now.
Mm-hmm.
If you could have gotten that medicine, sometimes it's just a diuretic, sometimes it's an inexpensive medicine for your hypertension. You never have the stroke. You're able to continue working, even at a low paying job, but you're able to continue working and you're never even going to need disability.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, you need disability because you had the stroke, or you have diabetes and you don't know it,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't take insulin or metformin or something else, and the diabetes gets worse, and then you need a foot amputated. And all of a sudden, you have a serious problem that may make you eligible for disability for a condition that was easily treatable had you been able to get that diagnosis at an early stage.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to lose all of that. And we're going to have more people being more disabled than they should have been because they couldn't get early treatment.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be interesting how this trickles out. So one thing I want to tighten up a little bit, Jim, is with this new Medicaid program, there's going to be a work requirement, right?
Yes.
Unless you're disabled. Did I understand that correctly?
Unless you're disabled or you have a mother with children under the age of 12. I don't think it says if you have a father with children under the age of 12.
All right.
I think it's just mothers
Okay.
or a couple other difficult tests to meet.
All right. So let's stay on this disability requirement. This person living paycheck to paycheck, the example that I gave, leaves the workforce, not able to work, what is the requirement that they need to prove to Medicaid that they're legitimately disabled, because they're not going to be able to trigger their Social Security benefits without the treatment. Are you following my
Sure.
my logic?
You can't, if you're not working, you can't get Medicaid, so then you can't prove you're disabled.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people on Medicaid are actually working. A huge amount of the Walmart employees are on Medicaid. A lot of other people working for large companies that don't provide health insurance or provide very poor health insurance have their employees on Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
And they're working, they're on Medicaid, they become disabled, they can't work, they all of a sudden lose their Medicaid, which is what you were describing, and now they can't prove that they're disabled.
Yeah.
And it's the vicious cycle. They may be able to keep their Medicaid for a few months until the system catches up that they're not working.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps in those few months, they may be able to satisfy the state's requirement that they're disabled.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends on which state they're living in and how strict they are in the requirements.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in Arkansas or Alabama or Mississippi, it's going to be much tougher to prove that you can't work than if you're in New York or Massachusetts or Vermont.
Especially Vermont, very favorable here. Okay, so let's talk, before we move on to the next point, if this doesn't apply to somebody out there listening, maybe you know somebody that could be in this area, pass this information on, but what do you have a solid idea on a defensive strategy that somebody could take? I'm going back to my paycheck to paycheck example. What that person could do, individuals in that, susceptible, possibly, potentially?
For starters, if you have Medicaid, you don't have to go to a clinic. You can go to a private doctor. And there are a lot of private doctors that take Medicaid. So see a private doctor, get a physical every year. That's the first basic requirement. Get a physical. Find out if there's anything wrong and if there's anything you can or should do for whatever is wrong. If you're getting worse, get to the doctor and find out what it is and why, and see if there's any treatment for it.
Mm-hmm.
The best thing that can happen is you have a condition that can be diagnosed and treated early and you don't become disabled. But if you do become disabled, you've built a good record of medical care to show why you had to stop working. And you have a doctor who's going to support the fact that you stopped working because of a medical condition.
Mhm. Good point. Jim, what about the paycheck to paycheck person? I mean, they're not there yet. They're not on Medicaid, and the potential vulnerability if they fall into that area, like short-term, long-term disability, that would definitely be helpful. But is there anything else for that type of person that could
Well,
protect them in this bridge between working and Social Security disability benefits?
I just had a hearing for somebody who was earning $45,000 a year. They stopped working. They had no more health insurance. They went on Medicaid. $45,000 a year is a nice income, but it was still paycheck to paycheck. And all of a sudden, they had nothing. They got their Medicaid. They continued their health care. Under these new rules, I don't know if they're going to be able to get Medicaid. It depends what their disability is and who they can convince they should be entitled to keep it. And that's going to be a state decision. They passed the buck to the states, where the federal government used to have some pretty strict rules on what the states had to offer in Medicaid. Now they've passed it all to the states and said each state can create their own rules.
Yeah, with less money.
With less money. But there's not going to be less money until 2027.
Oh, that's good news.
It's good news, but they're doing that so that it doesn't affect anything for the midterm election in 26.
Right.
Very few people will be cut off until 27, when there will then become massive terminations of Medicaid.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's not a good year to have something unfortunate happen to you.
Right.
Next category of questions is what is your take on the budget and how the decrease and, well, not budget, but the Social Security fund and the impact on potential checks? And when I say checks, Social Security disability recipients that then migrate into full retirement, do you have, like, they're saying a potential reduction in 5 to 10 years. What's your take on all this?
I'll start with a little history. In 1985, I started giving a speech nationwide, and I probably gave the speech 60 or 70 times, titled "There is no trust fund, there are no reserves," because the Social Security surplus was considered part of the federal budget so that the deficit didn't look as big. At that time, I said, if they raised the retirement age for full retirement to 70 and taxed your entire earned income, Social Security would have been solvent at 2250. The Democrats wouldn't raise the age and the Republicans wouldn't raise the tax. So in a bipartisan effort, they made sure Social Security was going to have long-term financial problems. At this time, the Social Security trust fund that doesn't exist anyways will run out of money in 2035.
2035.
If they actually run out of money and they start cutting people, they will still be bringing in enough to pay people 3/4 of what they're receiving now. But if they do that, there's going to be hell to pay with the people in Congress. Every person in Congress has one person on their staff who answers all of the Social Security questions. They get more questions about Social Security than any other issue. And if they tell people your Social Security is going to be cut by a quarter, a lot of people in Congress will lose their jobs.
Mm-hmm. That's
so
politically.
It's politically difficult. And they've proven by this recent budget that keeping their job is more important than doing what's right.
Mm.
A lot of them voted for a bill that they said was no good because they were afraid that either Donald Trump would run somebody against them or Elon Musk would run somebody against them. And people who said we can't pass this bill because it makes the deficit too big, or we can't pass this bill because it's going to cut people off of Medicaid, or for a variety of other reasons, voted for the bill anyways. There were only a couple that voted against it, even though, because that's what they really believed. When they get to the point that they're going to have to do something to keep paying Social Security, all they'll do is make the government go deeper in debt, or they'll raise the tax. Right now, if you make $170,000 a year, you pay about $10,000 in Social Security tax. If you make $500,000 a year, you pay about $10,000 in Social Security tax. If you make $1 million a year, you still pay $10,000 in Social Security tax. So they need to raise the Social Security tax. They should still allow people to retire at age 62 and early retirement, but raise the age to full retirement to 70. When Social Security was passed, the life expectancy was 59 and a half. Half of the people were never going to get Social Security. So at this point, a lot more than half, it's probably about 80% of the people get their Social Security. That's right, the 80% should get Social Security, but they have to do something to make it more solvent. And everybody is just pushing it down the road and letting somebody else worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's definitely has people concerned. But thank you for that. So that's good news for people that their checks, based on what you're sharing, should be stable.
I think it will be. I don't think Congress can afford to let the checks get cut.
Yeah, yeah. One kind of a nuanced question is dual eligible individuals, Medicare, Medicaid. And here at the Disability Digest, there's, I don't know what the numbers are for individuals that are dual eligible for Medicare and Medicaid, even after they're approved. And it's a big deal because they get their Medicare Part B premium paid for by the state, $185 a month. So do you have any insight on the big beautiful bill and how it will impact those individuals? Because right now it's like, if somebody's under $1,700 a month or less, then the state's picking up that Part B premium.
It depends on the state. In some states, if you're eligible for Medicare, you're cut off of Medicaid. They say, now in some of those states that say that, they still pay your Part B premium.
Yep.
But they won't pay any other Medicaid costs. In some states, they won't pay Medicaid costs unless your out-of-pocket reaches a certain level, and then they kick in. So it depends on the state. The new law doesn't really address it, other than to say that Medicaid's going to be up to each state. And the states are going to probably find a way to take that Medicaid money and use it for something else as much as they can.
Yeah. Yeah. One
like
thought is
Texas,
we might change the threshold, right? To instead
right,
of 1,700 that, it's brought down.
right.
Yeah.
Texas is the slowest state in the country in processing disability claims. They get the right amount of money per capita to process disability. They just divert as much of the money as possible so that they're very slow in processing the initial apps and the recons, because they're not spending the money on disability claims. So it's a matter of what's the state going to do with the money they get from the federal government. And there's going to be less federal oversight than ever.
All right. Last question on the big beautiful, and this has been awesome. And then we're going to open it up, as Nadine mentioned, to a Q&A in a moment. What advice, if any, do you have for a strategy for somebody that is applying for disability in this big beautiful bill environment? Is there anything they should do differently that stands out to you?
They should get as many of the doctor's original records as they can to submit. The record you get from my chart isn't considered a record, but on my chart, you can get the doctor's original notes. That's what they want, is the original office records.
Okay.
Depending on the state, the original office records might be free if it's for Social Security. If you write the provider or the hospital and say, I need these records for a Social Security disability claim. But get those records and get them to the claims examiner or to the judge if you're at the hearing level, and do that as quickly as possible. The next thing is, if you're going to a hearing, you need a representative. There's going to be a vocational expert at the hearing. The vocational expert's going to answer questions about the jobs you do, that you've done in the past, and what jobs you can do in the future. And your average claimant is incapable of properly cross-examining the vocational expert. One classic example I see is they use something called Job Browser Pro or SkillTran to tell you how many jobs exist. Job Browser Pro and SkillTran consider 35 hours a week to be full-time employment, but Social Security says 40 hours a week is full-time employment. So when you're doing that, the amount of jobs they say exist is inaccurate because they're not looking at 40-hour-a-week jobs. You have to be able to cleverly cross-examine them to get them admit that the numbers they used are inaccurate. One of my classic examples of about 6 months ago was the vocational experts said my client could stuff toys in a toy factory, stuffed animals. And I asked when he had last seen this job, and he said 6 months ago in southeastern Ohio, but he couldn't name the name of the company. When I have a hearing by phone or by video, I always have a second computer next to me that I'm Googling the jobs that they say they can do to find out if they're accurate. So I found the last toy stuffing job had left Ohio 6 years before this hearing. So I asked him, I gave him the name of the company that had left 6 years earlier. And he said, yes, I think that's the company. And I really locked him into saying that that was the company, and he was there, and he described the work he saw 6 months prior. And then I hit him with when that company left Ohio, and there were no companies stuffing toys in Ohio. And I got the judge to agree that none of his testimony was credible anymore. And she threw out everything he had said, and the judge was going to schedule another hearing, and I convinced her not to, and that this was her expert proved not to be an expert, and that the claimant should be paid, and she finally agreed to do that. But the typical claimant wouldn't have known to do that and wouldn't have known how to do that. So if you get to the hearing level, you need a competent representative who belongs either to NADA or NASCAR and takes classes on cross-examining the experts. But at the first two levels, if you have a good representative who works the case, if you're going to hire somebody at your initial or your recon, ask them what they do. Ask them if they get medical records. Ask them if they write a brief at that level. If they say no, you don't want them.
No.
If they do, then they may be the right one for you. But if you're going to do it yourself at those first two levels, get the medical evidence yourself, because at least half of the claims that are denied in the initial application level are denied because they didn't get all the medical evidence. And they have time limits in which to do it. And if they don't get it all within that time limit, they don't have enough to pay you and they turn you down.
Yeah. No, that's really good advice, for sure. The only one thing I want to bring up about the medical records and getting them is we have used a process where we watch the case file develop, And if they're not getting medical records, then we backfill. Have you found by submitting medical evidence that may already be in the file, any duplicates or any of that happening?
I had a case manager call me yesterday. She just got the file and she said, "What have you sent for?" And I told her, and she said, "What do I need to do?" And I said, "Wait." She didn't have to send for anything, but all those records are going to come in. I'll file them, and she's going to get credit for having gotten all of those records.
Got it.
She's going to treat me very well because she'll get credit for working a case that she didn't have to do anything on.
Okay.
So I send for the records as soon as I file the claim, sometimes before I file the claim.
Yeah.
And when I have somebody with an addiction problem, and the government accounting office says 60% of the people with addiction problems eligible for disability never file. You can have an addiction problem and be disabled because of your bipolar, your schizophrenia, or other conditions. And when I file a claim for somebody with an addiction problem, I have all of my medical first. I have a form filled out by their mental health therapist that usually has them meeting a listing. I make sure they get a physical. I get all of the psych records as well as all of the records from their internist. And I file those claims with a nice package. And I'll have people from DDS call me joking that, yep, you've got this person who's addicted to cocaine that we have to pay because they meet the schizo listings. And they think it's funny that I can win those cases where, frankly, I think at the hearing level, I might not win those cases. But at an initial recon, I can because I put such a good package together.
Good point. That's a really good point. Yeah, no, I've learned something here today. I thank you for that. Good. All right. So let's take a look at doing some Q&A, Nadine. How would you like to start this? Kick it off.
Yeah, sure. We got a lot of questions piled up here, and a lot of people really appreciate everything that they're learning from Attorney James Brown. We even have someone here who says that your voice is too relaxing. We got that comment.
I'll get more excited next time.
All right. So, before I read the questions, I'm also going to be posting a link for our Zoom room to those of you who would like to join us live. And again, before joining us, I would kindly ask that you use the same name on your YouTube account and on Zoom so that we can easily recognize you and that I would know that it's you who posted the question on YouTube. Okay? All right, so I just posted the link and let's go through some questions that we have here. So we get a question from Athena. She said, without having an attorney, how difficult is it for a new applicant to have all their medical records submitted? And are we charged by the doctor's office to request all the records ourselves? One of my issues that I'm concerned with as well is I'm on Medicaid, I have no income, and I need to apply still for SSDI.
It depends on your physician and it depends on your state as far as the cost. About half of the states have no cost for medical records if it's for a Social Security claim. So find out your state's rules on it. And when you ask for the records, make sure you say it's for a Social Security disability claim. It's not difficult if it's a state that's for free. In Texas, I think the doctor has to provide the records in 30 days. In Ohio, the records are free, but there's no set amount of time that they can do it for. I just had one of the third-party providers tell me that I had to pay $163 for the records. So I sent them a letter saying I was subpoenaing the doctor to come to the hearing with the records and to testify. And the doctor called me about 5 minutes after she got my letter and said she was faxing the records to me immediately, and she was no longer using that third-party provider for her records. So
Beautiful.
it's fun to do that.
Like it.
So we have someone who would like to join us live. Name is RXTOPC. This person has some questions about CDR. I'm gonna let him or her in. I don't know.
Okay.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
Hello.
Yeah,
How
I'm gonna mute. Just hold on,
is I'm on Medicaid. I have no income and I need to apply still for SSDI.
Sounds a lot like you, Nadine.
Oh yeah.
It depends on your state as far as the cost. About half of the states have no cost for medical record if it's for a Social Security claim. So
How about we mute, take a question until
when
RXTOPC
you
has
ask
the
the
sound
record,
under
make sure you say it's for a Social Security disability claim. It's
hello,
There.
Okay.
hello,
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
you can hear me, okay. I had to just mute the live stream, so usually catches me off guard. Attorney Brown, I just have a couple of questions for you, rather, maybe some of them may be a little more involved, but the first thing is, I'm 65, and my CDR would have been up for last December, I believe, if it was to be timed perfectly, of course. What do you think the chances are, even with this new administration, that that would take place?
Zero. They're not going to do a CDR on someone 65. They will probably not do any CDRs on anybody 61 or older.
Okay. It's good to know. The other thing is, I wanted to, this is if a CDR was possible. I'm being treated for OCD, anxiety, depression, social anxiety, and also stenosis of the back, neck, and osteoarthritis of the hip. Now, they talk about these units that go around following disability beneficiaries to see how disabled they are. And they talk about, driving yourself to a doctor's appointment requires a lot of concentration. You really should not be doing something like that if you're being treated for those mental conditions. So I'm kind of wondering, well, you know what? I don't really have anybody that is going to drive me to these appointments, and except for an Uber, of course, but why should I spend that money when I have my own car and I'm able to have the concentration to go locally to these doctor's appointments, and I'm required to do them by Social Security laws. And the other thing is, I don't have anybody also to go with me that can help me with my social anxiety in those waiting rooms where I have to find an isolated spot to sit in. How do I present something like that?
Okay. You're allowed to drive. You're even allowed to cut your lawn or shovel your drive if you're on disability. What you have to do is show that if you do that, you have to stop and rest. You can't shovel all the driveways on the street or mow all the lawns on the street. You have to show that you're not able to do 40 hours a week of work. And cutting your lawn and then going inside and sitting down for an hour because that's all you can do doesn't mean you're capable of working. So don't worry about driving or doing something physical because that doesn't prove that you're capable of doing your job.
Yeah.
Hey, Liz, just one last question. You brought it up a little while ago about addiction. My mother had passed away last year, and that kind of spawned on a drinking problem, which is now being treated. I already went through the detox stage, and I'm now in the outpatient program. Do they look at that as as something that's okay, being that I'm treating myself for it, getting treatment for it?
You have to show that you're disabled irrespective of the addiction problem. So you have some serious physical and mental problems over and above the addiction problem. So they wouldn't consider that disabling.
Would I have to submit that?
First of all, you're not going to get reviewed.
Yeah, I know. I'm just asking for the same, the OCD in me is starting to kick in. So I'm kind of wondering if it did happen, what would be the proper way to present it?
Are you seeing a psychologist or a
Yes.
physician?
Yes.
Is it a social worker or a psychologist you're
It's
saying?
both. It's both.
Well, then you would give the name of the psychologist.
Okay. All right. I do appreciate the time you spent with me.
Okay, good luck.
I appreciate it. Brian, Nadine, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thank you very much as well. All right. So we still got a few more questions here that we have to cover. So a question from Gianfranco. He said, does working with an online seller like Amazon, where you invest in a product and they sell them for you, and you claim your part of the profit, count towards your allowable income, or is that considered passive income?
If you're actually involved in the manufacturing of that product, it's actual income. If it's passive income and somebody's making it and you're just getting your royalties, it's passive income and it doesn't count.
All right. So if you're just selling somebody else's product and you get like a commission out of it, then it is considered passive, right?
Right.
Yep. Okay. So another question here from Elizabeth. What impact does a new diagnosis have on your continuing benefits?
It helps convince them that you're still disabled. So if you were disabled for one or two diagnoses, and now you have a third or fourth diagnosis in addition, it helps show that you've gotten worse and that you're not able to return to any type of employment. So it should keep them from terminating your benefits.
And a question here from Kitty. She said, the only doctor I saw for any length of time in the last 12 months was verbally abusive. I was told to report her to the VA. How do I add her info? Include the VA case or complaint number? And then she said, I'm shy. So,
Well, you would want to get those medical records. You can ask for your C file from the VA, C like Charlie, and that gives you all your medical records, and those are free for any veteran. And those records will be in there. And don't be shy, go get them. You're entitled to them. They used to send you all your C files. Sometimes it would be a box with 20,000 pages of records. Now they give it to you on a flash key.
Yeah. Anyway, I think what she's referring to as being shy is joining us live
Oh.
to ask the question. All right. And our question here.
I want to say one other thing to the person who thought I was too calm. When I talk about the big, beautiful bill and all the things this administration is doing, I usually get extremely excited, but I didn't want to show that on the show today.
Oh, and that was the person that said that she's shy. She's the one who made a comment that your voice is relaxing. She said it's like a papa reading bedtime story. That's what she said. All right. So we get a question here from Double C. Hi everyone. My question is, I get SSI and I'm up for a review in November. Which form will I get the CDR? Which form will I get, the CDR or the function report?
You'll first get the CDR. Depending on how you complete the CDR, Some people just get the CDR, it's completed, and they're done with you. Other people get the function report too. Some people get both at once. A small percentage of people get both at once. But if you don't get the function report, don't worry about it. They're just doing a perfunctory review of you.
Next question is from Julie. She was asking, what if you're 65 or older? Will you lose Medicaid?
It depends on your state. Some states, if you're eligible for Medicare, take away your Medicaid, and other states let you keep both.
Now, question from Charlie. Is it worth getting a case manager or social worker to aid in SSDI once application has already been submitted?
That's like saying, should I get a
A
lawyer
representative, yeah.
or
Yeah.
representative? It depends who
Mhm.
you get.
Yeah.
I've seen some social workers or case managers who are incredible, and I've seen others who really don't know what they're doing.
Mhm.
So if you've got a social worker who understands the Social Security rules, they can be incredibly helpful.
But to answer his question, he still can get representation even if his case, I mean, his application is already submitted, right?
Yes, he can.
Well, I just want to chime in on this. So this is here at the Disability Digest. This is where I see one of the biggest gaps for individuals because they maybe do a phone interview, they complete the online, they're like, oh, I got everything in. But once you've submitted your application, there's like a bunch of things that you can do, depends on your age and your condition and all that, but you haven't submitted any real valuable evidence yet is one glaring thing. So there's doctor support forms, there's third-party information you could get personally or from work. So there's a lot of things you can do once you've hit the button or hung up the phone.
One other thing adding to that, and I've said this before, but a diagnosis is not a disability. I just represented somebody who was denied who had a stroke, but he never let them know that he was paralyzed on one side. He said, I had a stroke. He didn't tell them what he can't do because of that stroke. They denied him. They never did a consultative exam. The medical records didn't all come in, and he got denied quickly.
Mhm.
And that's one of the cases I think I might actually win on recon because he was referred to me by his neurologist. So I
Oh,
know I'll get the records and I'll get a good medical source statement. But your diagnosis isn't a disability, it's a diagnosis. And you have to explain on your application how that diagnosis limits your ability to work.
mhm, mhm.
That's very well said, and I think that also answers one of the questions here from Noe. He said he has CMT and type 2 diabetes, and he's asking if he qualifies for SSDI. So I think that also answers that question. We get a question here from Blaine about CDR again. She said, will individuals over 60 with no improvement expected on the SSDI award letter be still flagged for a CDR review?
Right now, they haven't said they're going to do anybody over 60. That could change, but I'm not anticipating them doing anybody over 60. I think they're going to start with people under age 50.
Mm. Yeah,
What if the person is under age 50, but in the award letter it says no improvement expected?
I had a case where my client got a letter saying you have 30 days to get us proof you're still disabled. She did nothing. They then sent a letter saying we'll give you 10 more days. She then got a letter saying, you didn't provide any proof that you're still mentally retarded, so we're denying your disability. And this woman had a 62 IQ.
Yeah.
So there was no improvement possible. I called the person at DDS and I gave him the social security number. And I said, pull this file, because if you found a cure for her, you're going to win a Nobel Prize. And he pulled it, he apologized, and he reversed it immediately. But this was a woman who couldn't even understand the letters she was getting.
Mhm.
So just because there's medical saying there's no improvement expected doesn't mean the clerk or the case manager reviewing it isn't going to send the letter out, because they have to send a certain amount of CDI letters every week.
Mhm. So Jim, here's a question for you while we're on this topic. Let's say somebody was approved 10 years ago for a condition that said no medical improvement available, or whatever the last word is. But now 10 years later, there's some new magic dust that could be beneficial to that. What happens? They're 49 years old now. That's my scenario. Could they be reviewed?
They could be reviewed.
Yeah.
Now, they don't necessarily have to get that treatment. Social Security still has to prove that they've improved enough to return to work.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay.
Thank you so much for that. Another question here from Lainey Grace. My Part B premium, it's not being paid by Medicaid. They won't pay it, and I don't understand why other than they say I make too much money. I'm in California.
I don't know all the details, but one thing, you know, it could be the amount of your check or other assets or resources you have. One thing that you could do as a member here at the Disability Digest, no cost for your membership, is you can request a benefit review. We have benefit review experts here. They'll go through like your situation, what you're entitled to, what you're paying for and you shouldn't be, and see if there may be something there that you know you can uncover.
And Medi-Cal is usually pretty generous. So it's possible there's somebody else living in the house with income that's putting her over the limit too.
Could mess it up. Yeah. Yep.
All right. Next question from Coney. If you're on SSDI, will the big beautiful bill affect taxes if you're 59 and disabled?
If you're six, did you say 59 or 69?
59, 59.
Oh, okay. That's one of the things that is going to be up in the air. They say it's not going to be taxable. Right now, Social Security is taxable if your household income is above a certain level. They're raising that level, but if your income is still above that level, the Social Security is taxable. So it depends if you have a spouse that's working, then yes, your income may still be taxable.
Okay. All right. Got a question here from Letitia. She's asking, who is an educator in disability determination services and what do they do? Also, I'm wondering at what part of my disability claim I am currently in with an educator being assigned to my case.
Okay, that's an
I like that
adjudicator.
word. But agitator is a good term. Probably
Right.
too.
Adjudicator. Yeah.
The,
Sorry.
the agitators are the people in Washington making the rules.
Adjudicator. Yep.
Right. The adjudicator is the person who makes the decision. And if the case is with the adjudicator, that means that there's probably a decision coming out soon.
Hoping for positive, favorable.
Yeah, it doesn't mean positive or negative. It just means a decision's coming soon.
Yeah.
All right. Another question here. My husband, 100% SMCS with TBI, miserable. Can he apply now while he's still working, or does he have to quit and wait?
If he's making less than $1,500 a month, he can apply. If he's making more than that, he can apply, but they'll turn him down because he's working and making above what they call substantial gainful activity, which means you're able to earn over $1,500 a month.
All right, we got one last question here from Julie. She said, I'll be 60 next month. I live in New York. I have a Medicaid trust account. What could cause me to lose Medicaid?
If your income becomes too high, when she says Medicaid trust account, I assume that's something like a special needs trust.
Yeah, or
I
able account.
Right. I have seen times where Social Security has attacked the special needs trust and said it's not valid and you're not entitled to SSI. And I've actually been involved in some of those. I had one where they said my client was overpaid $150,000, and we actually got that whole overpayment waived. So if the special needs trust was written by somebody who understands SSI, there shouldn't be a problem. If you take too much money out of this special needs trust for purposes that weren't designated in the special needs trust, they could also say you're getting too much money and you're overpaid now.
Mm-hmm. Good. Great.
Yeah, those are all the questions that I have.
We had a good assortment of questions today. So folks, a few things that I want to let you know of as we wrap up. But first of all, before I do, Attorney Brown, thank you. Nadine, thank you for your contribution. Great event. I'm in hopes that the State of the Union for Social Security items, the big beautiful bill and how it's going to impact you, some of the tips that were shared, that you take and put those into practice now more than ever. I mean, I don't know about you, Jim. I'm just like starting my 20th year doing this, and I can safely say like this is one of the most challenging times. Maybe you have a different perspective on this because you've been doing it much longer than I, but
it's challenging. And one of the big reasons it's challenging is because we don't know what they're going to do. They're just making it a total crapshoot that they're throwing things at us without them knowing what they're doing. And it's like when they laid off the 7,000 people. They had no idea who they were laying off or whether or not they were saving any money. Somebody just decided there's 7,000 people too many to lay off. It's like when they they went to the VA and they were going to lay off 93,000 people. And they didn't care what it was doing to the system or who they'd slow up. They've now changed it so they're going to lay off 13,000 people at the VA. They just announced that because they realized they were going to wreak havoc on the system to lay off 93,000. So,
pivot.
Yeah, with the 10,000 laid off at Social Security, nothing is going to get better. And there's a hiring freeze. So nobody's going to be replaced. And other people are going to leave as time goes on. I know some judges that are planning on retiring this year or next year. They're not going to be replaced. So the system is going to get slower, or they're going to say you have to process the claims in a certain amount of time. So they're going to deny claims because they don't have the proof in that certain amount of time.
Yep. So we just have to do the best we can to navigate. So that's why we're here, folks, to do these events for you. So we hope that you enjoyed the show today. So here's a few ways that we can help you going forward. These events we put out different videos on our YouTube channel. Really, the best way that we can help you is having you join us as a member. There's no cost, and you get a customized approach once you fill out your profile. And that customized approach by filling out your profile helps us understand, like, are you approved? Are you not approved? Maybe you're not approved, but you are applied and waiting, or applied and denied, or waiting for a hearing. And then we can get you into custom information. We can get you to speak with advocates like people on Nadine's team. We have support groups. We have 24/7 support that's digitally available to you as a member. So that's the best way that we can help you. Rolling forward with these events, of course, we encourage you to continue to participate. These are for you. We learn from you as well. So I thank you for the engagement. And I think Jim had mentioned as we were offline before the show that he's willing to come back. And in the next episode that we do, he's going to break down 2 of the most critical forms in the disability process and give you explanations on how to complete those. And those are the adult daily living questionnaire that you receive when you apply. Some of you get them with CDRs. And then your work history report. So you're going to get it like Attorney Brown was filling them out. So mark your calendars. We'll be back to do that. And we'll be back next week with another show, a different topic, and encourage you to come back and do that. All right, everybody. Thank you much, Jim, again, in closing.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, everyone.
All right. Make it a great day, all. Be well.
Bye.